All right, so this is the synthesis time. We have like inundated you with a lot of information, and I think hopefully we have transmitted the facts that climate change is happening, it's impacting emergency medicine, there are educational and research gaps which need to be filled, and we need to be advocates for this. So I think now, we'd like to take the remaining time. We have until, we're going to end a little bit before 5, so we can kind of wrap up, provide some resources, and then talk about the feedback forms. But I think to start out, my question for the panel would be, is I think we really tried to be granular in thinking about our next steps. So I'm going to ask each panelist to give me what they think the highest priority is for our next step, whatever that may be, within respective areas of expertise, whether that be research, education, or otherwise. If I could only have you do one thing as the next step as we try to advance this with emergency medicine, what would that be?
I would say grow this interest group. I think that's the perfect platform to advance it. We've infiltrated, and that there's no better demonstration of interest than having, active, robust, big numbers, lots of activity.
I think that I'm thinking of the adage of how practices change. And minds don't change. Practice changes when old people die. You laugh, but that's how things change. You think of what's the generation time of ideas to propagate, and it's about the same amount of time as it takes for career professionals to retire. So the question becomes, how can we make that go faster?
More global warming.
All right, let's just all leave and go have beer then. Our job's done.
Can you
I'm
change
not
the
saying how
channel?
do we make the people die faster. I'm saying how do we advance the practice faster, Stuart? So I think we do it by tapping into the younger generation, the residents and students now who are coming into this with already a bent that their parents should stop idling in the school pickup line. That you're starting from the premise that this is a problem. We don't need to teach you that. So what I would say is you youngins need to push your faculty to change, to push your faculty and ask them questions like, why do we do it this way? Why do we throw so much crap out in the emergency department? Where does it go? Why aren't we doing anything to reduce our carbon footprint in healthcare? And see what their answers are. I think the good faculty are going to say, wow, that's a really good question. The best faculty are going to say, let's work on it together. The good faculty are going to say, that's a great question, you should do that. That's an okay answer too. And then we'll be able to kind of move the dial a little bit, hopefully a little bit faster than the time it takes for those folks to retire and be replaced. So I think the interest group is a good way, but I think that we should also consider other internal organizations, things that already exist. So Healthcare Without Harm, encourage your institutions to join Practice Green Health, which has a whole bunch of resources to make things easier. And then find within those organizations the niche that interests you, your point of entry. What do you want to do? Find the people who are doing it and do it with them.
I'm pretty new to this, and I would say that just hearing these stories is that everyone in this field has pretty much forged their own path, in a really strong way. And I think that, along the way you meet mentors, and your mentors are the ones who help you get where you are. And I think within the older generation, what can be done is forming good mentorships with the younger generation in order to help provide at least a viable path, a career path, a way to get there. And that's something that I think needs to happen. Is also with the interest group, focusing around that, but also creating opportunities for the residents, for the medical students to be engaged in meaningful research. Right? Like you're saying, like, what can I do? So we need to be able to create these opportunities to bring people up.
I think we still have a little work to do to concretize what we are envisioning. I think that laying out a platform that says, okay, this is where we think we should be as a specialty, by 2025, 2035, 2045. Because I think part of the challenge of all this and the innovation is the longer term, the need for longer term thinking. And alongside that should be, and this is what we expect to be happening in 2035 or 25, 2035, 2045, domestically and globally. Of course, that gets very dicey, but some things we can say fairly confidently. And then we probably need to take a bit of an iterative, almost Bayesian approach to this and say, okay, well, every few years we need to check in and say we are or are not on track to be prepared for when half of Miami migrates in mid-century, et cetera.
Should we put everything on the same timeline and talk in terms of 2100 goals?
Well, I don't know if 2100 is very useful. I think it's useful from a narrative standpoint, but I don't think it's useful from a planning standpoint, unless you're developing infrastructure systems, and then it becomes more relevant. But you're smiling. I think it was a joke that I totally missed.
Bum.
I think getting us all together has been a tremendous value add, and I think that's the greatest thing that we've pulled off so far. I think for each of all of us in the room to realize that we've got the moral high ground, we've got the economic high ground ultimately, and I think to feel certain that what you're doing, it's the right thing, and it's something that's going to be good for you, it's going to be good for your kids and grandkids, and to be firm in that. I think in the face of what are potentially daunting challenges, it's easy to say, the dissonance of, holy crap, this is a problem, I don't know how to solve it, I'm not going to do anything, but to say, no, we're in the right in this, we need to be making changes, and to be firm in that, and to understand just the basic science, and to not be strident and not to be critical, but just to say, no, this is a physical reality, and we need to figure out how to address it, and to move forward from there with that certainty. The certainty of a zealot can make all kinds of things happen that are sometimes awful. In this case, just the certainty of these are the scientific facts and we need to deal with them as extraordinarily capable human beings. I'm not, and Jeremy was giving me a bit of a hard time, I think, earlier, saying I was maybe a little more optimistic than I think of myself as being. But human beings are ferociously adaptable. And I'm not worried about humans ultimately as a species being threatened. We're certainly going to leave a diminished planet, I think, to future generations, and we're going to grotesquely impact populations at greater risk than we are. But I think we're also going to be at risk. But I think the reason things are going to maybe change sooner than we'd like to think is it's things like, talking about Florida and the idea that, up until very recently, and in some parts of our country still, the federal government is subsidizing shoreside real estate because no rational human being would insure that land. And so as things like that start flipping and suddenly, and this is happening in Boston, we just had 400-year high sea levels because of climate change and wind patterns. In these neighborhoods, the prices of this prime real estate is already going down and people aren't wanting to buy it. And when that happens in mass across Florida, it's going to be like, holy shit, this is real. We are in deep trouble. Our stranded assets of, the big petro firms, but right now it's like, whoa, Exxon, we're going to make you Secretary of State. You're so smart. And it's suddenly going to be like, holy crap, we've got all this stuff we can't sell. And I think things stand to change sooner than we think. Again, the analogy of slavery of, this is the way things have done, this is what the country was built on, we're not going to change it. Yeah, we are. So I think there are reasons to be heartened and to think that what you do matters hugely.
So I'd love to make this conversational. So I'd love to hear what you guys think your next steps are. for us as a group, for you personally. Again, I mean, I think we very much want this to be a back and forth conversation, so I'd love to hear what you guys think.
I'll ask a question instead of
Sure.
But my background is in healthcare quality, and one of the main things we learned was that, healthcare is about 30 years behind business, in implementing actually quality standards and processes and stuff. And I kind of view this topic, climate change, and healthcare's engagement with it as also being about, well behind business leaders. And my question is and there are organizations of businesses that are working on this and leading it. I think when the governments fail us, we have international businesses that can support us. And I guess my question is, how can we best, or have you thought about engaging business leader communities, partnering with them to make more happen? Because obviously the federal policies are going to take a while, and I don't think we have a while.
It's an interesting question. It came up last week, and I don't remember exactly the context, but we were talking about some particular research opportunities and how we could maybe get it funded. And there was the question of getting a for-profit entity, some business entity, with an interest in the field to pony up some cash. And our team was concerned about the potential outcome, for better or worse, that any product would then be possibly tainted by the fact that it was funded by this, we'll say, industry entity. I'm sorry I can't give more details about what the particular project was or who the entity was, but it would make sense if you heard it. So it's a concern that we want to move things forward, and there are certainly businesses out there that are leading edge. When I was a consulting engineer, I worked for some of them. They were some of our clients who clearly were very interested in doing the right thing. And that's very heartening, and some of them would be interested in funding this kind of research and partnering on this kind of research, either because it serves their interests. You can think of plenty of energy companies that actually are investing fairly heavily in renewable energy sources, despite their reputations of being fossil fuel producers, because they want to diversify their portfolios. So is that really a harm for us academics to partner with them? It's all optics. It's all how do you go out into the world and advocate when you're receiving money from these people. And I would analogize it to all of our basic science colleagues who are making great drug discoveries, or we hope to be great drug discoveries to help our patients. And they're clearly funded by pharmaceutical companies because they're the ones who have the money and the interest to do it. So I personally don't necessarily have a problem with seeking out those for-profit entities to fund us, just like we could have foundations do it. As we heard, plenty of foundations just aren't interested in it. And if the choice is between no funding to do the work, therefore not doing the work, versus some funding to do the work from a for-profit entity, I'll take the funding and work with the for-profit entity who has the expertise and the knowledge to advance something. So probably a little bit more than your question asked, I think. But I think we need to have an open mind and recognize that medical research is, at least in large academic institutions, and we are all at large academic institutions, is very much focused on you do your research, you get your NIH funding, because NIH funding brings in huge indirects to your institution, the institution wants it, and they get cachet, and they get to announce, oh, we are now number 2 on the NIH funding list for emergency medicine. By the way, Harvard, not on the list because of the way Harvard does its accounting. So you'll never see Harvard on the list because all of our grants aren't from through Harvard. That's it's true.
Can we put that on the action item list?
So that's your direction. That's what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to get your NIH funding because that's how you know you've won the game. And personally, I choose not to play the game. I choose to say this is the work that I want to do. The chances of NIH funding my work are slim to none, and I think Slim is still in Puerto Rico with the power out. So I'm open to private foundations, to for-profit entities, to whomever wants to fund me to do it because I think it's the right work to do.
I have two things. One is that, I think that making an economic argument for this is altruism does get you somewhere, but I think when it comes down to people putting money on the line, if you make an economic argument, like your hospital is going to save money, they're like, we are? Oh, yes, you are. So I think you have to make an economic argument, or even no investor is going to invest in something that has no real return, with big dollars. And the second thing I wanted to say was some of the research that I do in Guatemala, looking at worker health and heat exposure, that's being funded by a sugarcane company because their workers are dying, and they're like, this is really bad. We're not our workers are dying, and we're not making money, and this is unsustainable. And so private industry is picking up on these effects earlier and voluntarily funding because it's actually affecting their business and their functioning. So I think the private sector is involved. It's just really decentralized. But when there is an economic argument to be made, that's when people, I think, are going to the private sector is going to actually start putting down on this more.
It may be something even like their employees' healthcare costs.
Yeah.
And trying to improve the general health of their employee population.
Exactly.
So I'm gonna say what Amy is thinking right now,
Could be a couple different things.
Okay, I only have one. And to take off on Cece's statement that your institutions will fund things that have positive returns, I refer you to Healthcare Without Harm and Safe Harbor in the Storm, which is a wonderful report that just came out recently, this year, right? Yeah. Basically outlining the business case for resilience and climate change mitigation with certain vignettes, some positive and some negative, that, what was it, Texas Health Science Center? Derek, you're from Texas. What's it called?
What was the question?
The Texas Health Science, Texas Health Center or something, the campus with the 23 hospitals in Houston.
They built a dike.
Well,
I'll come to it real quick.
so they got hit by a hurricane some years ago and basically wiped out everything.
UTMB. University Texas Medical Branch.
Okay, there you go. So, so they had to close. They lost boatloads of money because they couldn't serve their patients. They put in some mitigation strategies. They built a more resilient campus for everybody. Hurricane Harvey came, nothing happened. That's money they saved.
Amy, do you
I have a copy if anyone.
Yeah.
Amy, would you like to share the things in your head, if they were
Um,
or not?
I think what Jay was signaling me about is there was a report that if you want to make the business case to your administrators, it's called Sustainable Hospitals Health Bend and Healthcare Cost Curve. And what they did, it was a Healthcare Without Harm research report. They looked at the highest performing hospitals in practice green health for the awards. They looked at 5 different categories: red bag waste reduction, recycling, surgical kit reformulation, reprocessing in the OR, and energy savings. And they took the savings and then they extrapolated the data to how much would the healthcare sector nationally save if every hospital performed at the same level. And I think they looked at the 5-year savings and the 10-year savings, and it's like $15 billion. So it's huge, and it's a report I'd be happy to share, and it's very, very impactful when you share information like that with your administrators, because it resonates with them. And the other thing I want to say, talking about the business world, there's another physician in our network, Emily Sene from Mount Sinai. She leads the sustainability program there, and her whole approach is business, and everything she learned from the business community is what she tries to apply to the sustainability program at healthcare. and she thinks the big difference between business and healthcare is they all do reporting. They all do GRI and CSR reporting, and they're held accountable for their reporting, and there's really none of that in healthcare.
Wait, those two reports, just so we have everybody.
Corporate social responsibility reporting and GRI reporting. I mean, I don't know a lot about it because it's not something we did in healthcare, but it's a sustainability reporting.
Okay.
And businesses.
Triple bottom line stuff.
And their investors expect them to do it, so that's her approach.
Have you ever thought about grant officers? So we mentioned NSF earlier, and now we're talking about business opportunities. So you have a lot of small businesses, you have firms that actually, pull data to see if there's markets out there to see, okay, we'll sell this. There is a market out there for saving hospitals money on air conditioning. So who would be interested in that? Air conditioning companies or anyone that's, coming up with new tech as far as like, AC technology goes. So NCF has the seed fund, which is to help stimulate small businesses, and these firms are actually firms that are trying to get money to get their company off the ground. So when I bring up NCF and other organizations like it, they have these officers that are in charge of delegating these funds to certain causes. So I think it would be worthwhile to reach out to these officers, and they have them listed on these websites, which are NCF, NSF, or DOD, and looking at these officers and seeing where climate change fits within their mission. And you'll see there's like biotechnology, there's healthcare. So reach out to them and be like, hey, this is we're with SAM, and we're focusing on climate change and healthcare. Where would you see this in the future as far as your mission goes? And for the most part, I think they're pretty excited when their phone rings because not that many people know their office or their roles. So setting up an actual conversation with these officers that are in charge of millions of dollars for small businesses, you could definitely find out. Okay, so like who is it that would be interested in our mission? So that's just one thought I had. I thought I'd share.
Yeah, we'll help you do it.
Perfect, yeah.
You're taking the great faculty role that will help them.
Yes, right. I know. I
Right.
was going to say it's a great
Not
job for
good.
you, but then I said,
Great.
no, I should say I will.
The subtext was you should do that.
Yeah, so, as I was telling Renee at the break, so as much as we think this is a science, it's also very political, as is most public health issues. So, and I was telling Renee, I was at the you guys in Massachusetts, I know you have a very strong medical society, you was at the House of Delegates a few weeks ago. And there's a whole section on public health, of which not one resolution is on gun control. A lot on gun control, a lot on opioids, even abortion, even child abuse, another one on climate control. So, and certainly this is probably as political as something like gun control, right? Or I mean, everyone thinks guns are bad, but there's always people who agree, and so I think probably you have the same thing here with climate control. So I would just advise to Morgan, and we have a president who just pulled out the Paris Climate Agreement, right? So it's very political here in this country as well. So I would think you would have to get involved in some advocacy issues, and one of the ways, especially if you're in Massachusetts, is to get some resolutions out there, and you can have them advocate for you. They have a great name in Massachusetts, they're very strong, I'm not sure about the rest of the state medical societies, but it's a way to get access to lobbyists into the political, I think, realm of what you're trying to do. Now public health is political. It just is.
Excellent.
My mother was a health director of Central Virginia, and she had to fight for every goddamn budget she got. And it's brutal. They're spot on.
It's not just about the science, unfortunately.
So in Massachusetts, we have a very small organization now called Physicians for Policy Action, founded by an infectious disease specialist and a pulmonologist at Harvard. And they have taken on themselves to kind of provide avenues for advocacy. So people from this organization have testified on Beacon Hill, that's the state house in Massachusetts, and are continuing to work for other advocacy avenues. They were involved in, let's see, there was a march just this past Saturday about insulin prices. They were involved in gun violence and still are. So there is a little bit grassroots happening. You mentioned politics. The Mass Medical Society by itself is its own political matter. So the fact that MMS isn't necessarily involved in this, I think, might say something about MMS more than physicians in Massachusetts. The same as not all physicians necessarily agree with the AMA. But there are certainly people in Massachusetts and around the country who are pushing for more advocacy from physicians, and there are those of us active in the realm who are interested in doing that more so than others. So the opportunity is there for students and residents and faculty to take these roles on with very little kind of experience or training needed to provide a respected physician's voice.
Just to answer your initial question,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I'm starting medical school, so I'm not really into the realm of this level, but I think one of the things that's really interesting to think about is that there is a lot of opportunity for innovation around engineering solutions. My undergraduate degree is in bioengineering, and I think there's a lot of opportunity for thinking about the materials we use and the devices we create, and that there are a lot of burgeoning people graduating with that degree. It's like we're the biggest bioengineering class is graduating right now. And so I think that there's some really exciting opportunities there. And I also think it's really interesting to think a little bit about how we can claim responsibility as the United States and the United States healthcare industry for the our carbon impact, and what is that doing internationally, because we aren't seeing the impact of what we've done in a lot of ways. And talking about airprint, I hadn't really thought about it in that way before, but that it's interesting to think about how we as medical communities or future medical communities serve communities that we're hurting without contributing more to the problem. If you have the answers, that'd be cool.
If I had answers, maybe I'd have funding. So I can touch on the healthcare causing environmental degradation part, since that's really my focus. It's not a question of providing healthcare services without any impact. Just about everything we do is going to have an environmental impact. It's about weighing the pros and the cons, the risks and the benefits, just as we do clinically on a daily basis. It's how can we take care of the patients in front of us in the least impactful way to the patients not in front of us? Or put another way, how do we keep the people not in front of us from becoming patients? So in my perspective, it's trying to choose the better routes. It's trying to identify better practices, advocating for institutions to codify those better practices, and kind of going from there. But I don't think that the goal can be no impact. It's just not possible. We do stuff. We have lots of things that we do that are going to have an impact, but we should try and minimize those.
Other thoughts from the panel?
Just something I read recently was that, for hospitals, and Amy, you probably know more than I do, but for hospitals to reduce their footprint, something like 50% of cuts in their energy usage can be done with simple things, like light switches, like lights that only turn on when people walk in the room and then turn back off, or like water, whatever. Like simple stuff. It's not about like we need some technologic breakthrough to figure out how to do this. It's not like mysterious. It's
The number I knew was 10%.
10,
That
okay.
it can be reduced by 10% just by changing
Okay.
employee behavior, which doesn't sound like a lot, but my little hospital
Yeah.
in Massachusetts
huge. Yeah, 10%. So, I think it comes down to more than about organization and systems organizing and humans and people and interconnectedness and relationships to make changes happen, more than it has to do with advanced degrees in we don't need new technology. It exists. We need to start using what we have in a more productive way.
And there are some great resilience arguments to be made as well, that if you're using less energy to begin with, you don't need as big a generator for when the electricity goes out.
Right.
If you put in renewable energy sources like a solar array that maybe covers some fraction of your power, again, that's something that you don't need to recover in the event of a disaster. Most environmental improvement projects in a hospital translate to better disaster resilience.
So one of the things that Amy and I have been working on was to create CMEs within the CleanMed platform. It took years for us to happen. And the goal behind that was to get physicians engaged, right? How do you guys feel about taking what you're doing and making this in line of being, better about your impact air travel, making this a CME program available online?
We're trying to do that.
Yeah?
Yeah. So, well, this is the plug. So we've been thinking it's a plug.
There you go.
So Amy, Renee, and I are actually pulling together a climate health for emergency physicians webinar series. It's going to be released later this fall. That'll then be hopefully cataloged.
And the hard part is the CME process.
The hard part is the CME process. Well, the hard part is doing it cheaply, because CME is easy, but it's expensive.
Well, it shouldn't take 3 months to get CMEs.
No.
We can talk offline. There's a easy way to do that.
Is it cheap?
Yep.
Okay.
Cheap and easy.
I think Jay just said he'll pay for it.
And we can talk too.
Yeah. We tried. With the Medco, right?
Yeah, it was just expensive.
Very.
Yes. Anyway, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope that I'm just pausing this conversation, because I hope that this conversation continues beyond this room. And I hope that it can continue beyond kind of our closing remarks, but I do want to be respectful of time. And I know that most people probably have a busy agenda, so I want to try to make sure that we can finish up around 5. So just a reminder, so there's going to be a didactic at 9 a.m. on Friday, where we're going to really try to dig into the small research component that we did. We're going to try to dig into that for a whole hour. And then, again, the other plug, the interest group meeting is at 10 a.m. So even if you aren't able to attend, please join. And even if you can't join, please still contact me, because there's still a list that we're trying to keep going, even for people who are outside of SAM. Because I don't want, cost to be prohibitive for people to engage in this. And I know there's a lot of organizations, and especially depending on your level of training, there is cost factors which play in. So, right, there's no way we could cover all of the things on this giant diagram, but I hope that we gave an overarching view of where we are and where we need to go. And so from that standpoint, I want to really make an important plug. So the fact that SAM provided us this platform was sort of a huge achievement in and of itself. And so we really need feedback to show that, whatever you thought. But we just really need feedback in order, one, because this is the first time we have done this and the first time we've convened all these individuals in this room to have this type of discussion. And we really want to try to improve it, hopefully, fingers crossed, for next year. So please provide all of your feedback that you have. If you think of some later, please email us, because we really want this to be a continued dialogue so we can continue to improve this platform. But it's also important to provide evaluation so that way we can show SAM that people found value in this and encourage them to continue to do this next year. So that really has a lot of weight. And as far as resources, we'll send out kind of a follow-up. I think we have everyone's email, and we can get that through SAM for those that have registered. And if for some reason you didn't register, make sure you give us your information. And we'll send out kind of a list of resources as well. And the webinar series, again, is sort of one of the key things. So in conclusion, I hope that this was an engaging and fruitful afternoon for you. And again, I look forward to future collaborations, because for those of you who are early in your training, you guys really are going to be the future and the energy to help lead this forward. And I think we need to really try and utilize the expertise and the mentorship in this room to try and move us forward as a specialty. So thank you for your time.